Hello folks, old Buster coming to you again. Got another little story for you. It's going to tell you if any of these folks that you know, you like a place that you think need to be mentioned, or you folks that listen to my stories would like me to mention you, well, I'll be glad to. You just write me at busterandtheboys@yahoo.com and I'll be glad to do that. Pets. Knock knock. Who's that door answered by? Ring, ring, ring. The telephone was answered by who? The one that really cares, the one that loves them, the one that accepts them as part of their family. This is the owner of a pet. They are always there if their pet is lost or hungry or sick. They anxiously await word if they do not return as expected. They miss them when they're away. Their heart is captured by the unconditional love of their pet, and requite that love in like fashion. Boy, that's some fancy words, ain't it? Pets play an integral part in the lives of most people sometime in their lifetime. It is a life lesson. Well, Buster and the boys all had pets, several of them in some cases. Buster had Spike, his and Benji look-alike stray, and Perry the parakeet, and Bob the black kitten with no tail. You know, rat done ate it off when he was little, was born. Jessie and Dundee, that's the family's black Scottish terrier, and Sparky, and then Annabelle. That's an overweight Chihuahua that just demanded constant attention, sitting in Jessie's lap, wanting to be rubbed and petted. Walter had Smokey, his and gray horse, that was as loyal a friend as any of the boys, and Ike, his and bloodhound, and Chico the Chihuahua. Of course, Ike's also his brother, too. Well, Hired had, well, an assortment of critters that stretched from infancy to old age. Brownie, his and German Shepherd, was special, though. Now, Hired, let me tell you, that boy in critters, you know, he'd catch them rattlesnakes and grab them by the head and keep them in the refrigerator and play with them, and oh Lord, he could do any kind of critter. Well, let's start by telling about Buster's dog Spike. He was found by a friend of Buster's and was covered with ticks and cuckleburrs. Took a lot of doing to get that rascal cleaned up for sure. Buster went to visit Jim that farmed the family home place, and Jim told Buster he had just a dog for him. Well, Spike jumped into Buster's Ford and off they went back to Grandpa Gus and Grandma's house. Well, Spike settled right in and listened to Buster real good and minded well. He was as smart as a whip, that dog. Buster only let Spike in the house one time, and that was after his bath. Buster told Spike to lay on down there beside his chair and stay there or he'd put him out. The old Spike just looked up at Buster with them soulful eyes of his'n and twitched his'n ears to acknowledge what Buster done told him. Now, Spike had it real nice at the house now. He just couldn't wander around the main part of the house proper, but had what Buster called a convertible room. Buster built that whole thing for him. What it was I guess you could call it a one-car garage. Had heat and air conditioning and was carpeted and real nice. Dang dog would knock on the door every morning to wake up Buster. Well, after Spike got up and had a little bite, he'd make his rounds of the neighborhood and the town. Cause England ain't very big, you know. He'd go and greet all the dogs on his route and visit with folks that took to him and shook his paw. Then Spike would come on back to the house for his breakfast and be ready for the day with Buster. He went everywhere with Buster. When Buster went to town to a store, Spike would sit and wait outside till he come out. Some stores they let Spike come with him. He wouldn't do no business in there. He'd wait till he got outside. Well, everybody that passed by spoke to Spike and knowed that Spike was Buster's dog. He got all manner of treats and attention from the whole town. When Buster would mow the grass with his and riding lawnmower, Spike would sit up on the hood and ride till he was done a cutting. Spike would ride in the back of Buster's pickup truck, that Ford is, and bark a howdy to everybody that passed by. That dog learned real quick like now. Well, once when he was riding in the back of the truck, he jumped out too soon, got his leash caught, and was being dragged along. Now, Buster wasn't going very fast, and Spike was just low enough so his little legs was pedaling as fast as he could. He didn't get hurt none, but he never done that again, I tell you. One day, Buster was driving around the block trying to get Spike back in the truck, but Spike had himself another notion. He was playing a game of chase with Buster. Well, Jimmy Joe, a friend of Buster's, was roofing a house on that block and seeded off. Every time Buster went one way, Spike could go the other. He'd bark just a grinning from ear to ear, and them big old ears of his'n was just a flopping. Spike was quite the dog, you know. Now one time Larry, a Cherokee Indian friend of Buster's, brung an alligator snapper for Buster to see. Weighed in about 58 pounds, he said. Well, Spike wouldn't have none of it. Figured he was a protecting Buster, barking and raising Cain when Buster got too close to that turtle, he figured. Spike was that way with youngins too, protecting them and all. Everybody loved that dog, about as much as Buster, I tell you. When Jimmy Joe dropped off Bob, he took to caring for him too. Him being just a kitten and all. Dang rat done bit off Bob's tail when he was still a nursing. That's how come Buster come to call him Bob. Now Buster wasn't none too partial to cats, so he called Bob a hound, and darned if that cat didn't follow Buster around and mind just like Spike. When Buster fed Bob and told him to get on his in bed, he'd hop on in. Bob had a hole in an old weeping willow tree out back of the house and liked it a powerful lot. But he'd come on in and stay with Spike in the convertible room too. Both of them would huddle up together. They was fast friends, you know. Wasn't long though till another showed up. It was Bob's litter mate, and he was wild as a March hare. Jimmy Joe done caught him up and dropped him off too at Buster's. That one would never get close excepting at feeding time sometimes, and only if Bob was there. Buster had a gal friend that left him with a darn bird too. A parakeet it was. Buster told that bird he didn't like him none and want him around, but that darn bird just took to Buster. Buster called him Perry the parakeet. One evening Buster was eating some of them there atomic bomb fireballs that you get at Walmart. They was sweet and hotter than blazes. Well, Perry flew on over to Buster and gave him a kiss, a little peck on the lips, trying to get on Buster's good side. Well, now that dang bird got himself a whale of surprise, that's for sure. See, them birds ain't got no saliva glands, and he had to get to water real quick since he got into something that hot. But the dangest thing happened, that darn bird come back for more. Reckon the sweetness got to him. Well, Perry liking them fireballs so much, Buster taught him a trick. Folks would look at Buster, and nothing but Perry's little legs would be sticking out of his mouth. Heck, they thought Buster done ate that bird whole, hide, hair, and all, and alive at that. 'Tweren't so, and Perry just loved that trick. That bird could mimic any kind of sound. One night Buster woke up to the TV having channels changed. 'Tweren't so, just Perry sounding like it was. When Buster went to bed, Perry would jump up on him and wouldn't let nobody or nothing come even close to Buster. You could look in on Buster asleep and there would be Perry with one eye cocked open. And if you come too close, he'd go to picking and screeching to high heaven. When Buster went outside, Perry would stay lit on Buster's shoulder on the top of his hay. Wouldn't ever fly off unless Buster told him to, and then he would fly right on back to Buster. The Razorbacks was playing a game one Saturday, and Perry done heard them calling the Hogs and figured he could do that too. Well, Buster come in to see the game and heard them calling the Hogs, but it wasn't the fans, it was Perry. He'd holler, "Woo, pig, suey, Razorbacks, go Hogs, go." Well, that evening the newsman says he has something for sure that was real unusual. There was a parrot that could say, "Go Hogs, go," over in the next town. Well, Perry was watching and told Buster to call that newsman, cause it ain't so that no parrot could outdo or talk him at all. Buster up and called the newsman and told him to get on over to the house, cause he sure enough had a bird that could talk. When that newsman got there, Perry put on a show. Not only did he call the Hogs, but he talked as long as they did. The newsman just couldn't believe his ears and asked Buster if he wasn't some kind of ventriloquist or using some other kind of trick. Buster says to him that he'd seen his for himself, and Perry took that kind of personal, like saying he couldn't talk very good. Perry talked for near about 2 solid hours with that newsman, just a gawking with his mouth wide open where he'd catch flies. Now, that was a story for sure that the TV could show. Old Perry was famous. He didn't want no pay, just some more of them atomic fireballs from Sam's Club or Walmart. It's sad to say that all of Buster's pets passed on because they was family. The details ain't pleasant to talk about, but Buster knows the Lord has a place for 'em and reckons he'll see 'em again someday. Well, an owl got Bob and his brother. A mean-spirited woman let Perry out and he froze to death. Some darn yahoos hit Spike in the head with their car bumper whilst he was playing with his ball next to Grandma's car. They got so close it was a wonder they didn't hit Grandma's car too. Now, if you didn't think Buster didn't go on a rampage, you got another thing coming. Buster put up a 4x8 sign in his yard telling everybody what he was going to do to them when he found out who done killed Spike. He thought more of that dog than he did them. They didn't even have the gumption to come tell Buster they hit him and just left him lay. Buster was madder than a wet hen, I tell you. It took more than a year till Buster took down that sign. Like I say, sad times. Now, Hired has more pets than any one of the boys and most folks to boot. He had Brownie the German Shepherd, and he'd follow along with Hired when he rode his bicycle, and then when Hired took up his motorcycle riding. Brownie would run alongside of him too. Toughest dog you ever did see. Even bring in the paper in the mornings. Now, Hired dearly loved that dog, I tell you. Enough said. Walter has his in gray, and he is a fine one. But old Ike took the cake. That bloodhound would track through hell and high water. Ain't no telling what that dog would drag up neither. Now Chico was another matter. When old Barry Brown come a-courting Mary Gale, Chico would run to the door just to barking. Don't think he liked Barry coming around after Mary Gale, cause he had him a habit of biting the toes of the feller's boots. Walter didn't like nobody sparking his sister neither. Now, Barry always had on a pair of new boots or ones that was spit shine to a T. Walter would open that door and sick on Chico on Barry every time he'd come around. You know what a trickster Walter is. Said he right enjoyed it too. Well, Chico would head for the toe of them boots every time. Set old Barry to sail many a time, lighting the shuck off on that porch. Of course, all the boys would hoot and holler something fierce since they didn't cotton to no feller courting Mary Gale. Speaking of fellers a-courting a sister of theirs, Gary Ashland was out on the town with Walter's brother Ike one time when Ike got himself into a scuffle. Well, here Ike was a-fighting like a banty rooster, and Gary was just a-watching the fight. Well, back then, Gary was about as stout as a bull. Whilst he was a-watching Ike fight and all, he had a feller in a haylock like it weren't nothing at all. The feller wasn't even a twitching or squirming. Gary had him locked down so tight. He was so dang stout, just couldn't get it loose. Well, Ike went on up to Amarillo to a bar one night for a little fun and entertainment and dancing. Now, all them Ollingers was dancing fools, you know. Walter done went too and to keep him company. Whilst they sit there, a gal from a bank was over here talking about Ike. Said he done bought a ring and how much it cost and was going to ask Stella to marry up with him. Well, now, Ike was fit to be tied over that. Heck fire, he just bought the thing and ain't even asked Stella to marry him yet. Here they was at the bar and people are knowing more about his business than he did. Now, Ike wasn't none too happy about that. Them a gossiping about him, I tell you. Now, them Islanders got more stories than all true. They got more stories than Carter had little liver pills, I tell you. Now, Jesse. Now, this story make a feller cry. Just dang near hate to tell it, but this is what life is about. Well, Jesse had a hound or two in his time, but one in particular comes to mind. But first off, you just gotta know for some reason them Chihuahuas was real popular back then. Well, Jesse's folks had Sparky till he seed his in better days, and to this day, growed up and all, has Annabelle. He done inherited that handful from his daughter. Well, Jesse had 3 young'uns when he growed up. That dog just don't know when or where to pee, and Jesse steps in from time to time so as to be real careful like up in the night. That dang dog wants Jesse to hold and pet her every minute she's in the house. Now Dundee was a Scottish Terrier and the family pet. That's Jesse's dog, and she took to that dog like it was her own child. When Jesse went off to lawyering school, he done met up with a gal that made him leave one standing in the aisle. Now Jesse was a mess in them days. And most folks wouldn't ever know that about Jesse, him being so quiet and all. Jesse didn't say much. Well, I had to excuse me there, folks. I thought I got pages out of order. Jesse would report for the radio station and even went down on the river to interview young folks attending a concert, something like a Woodstock. Being summer and all them young folks was swimming in the river and sunbathing and having a high old time. Radio station put Jesse on a boat. They'd drive up and he'd start asking them questions. Well, they come up on a bunch of gals and danged if and they weren't all naked like. Can you believe that? Just a laughing and carrying on, Jesse seen the sights that day for sure. Heck, fire, Jesse even done some modeling for some clothes outfit one time. Anyhow, I got off the subject and that's why I was changing pages. When Jesse brung that highfalutin gal to meet his'n folks, Dundee, the Scottish Terrier, run out to meet her, and guess what? He done keeled over deader'n the mackerel and a nail hammerhead too. Quite the day, that's for sure. Jesse says to this day he should have took that as a sign that there woman weren't meant for him. But what can he say? Love is blind, just didn't work out. Now the wailing and the weeping and gnashing of teeth was something right pitiful, as Jesse's ma dearly loved that dog. She told Jesse and his'n pa that Dundee might just had a fainting spell. Jesse and his'n pa found a special place to bury Dundee, and his'n ma desired for his final resting place. She got so discombobulated that Jesse and his'n pa had to go back up and dig up Dundee to make sure he was dead. Oh Lord, I laugh about it, but it wasn't nothing I laughed about to her. Then they had to rebury him. Well, I don't think Jesse's ma ever got over that dog, and her being Christian and all, know just like Buster that the Lord had a special place for them critters. What I'm a-saying here is a rite of passage for Jesse. When his'n pa was standing out on the back porch holding Sparky, he fell off and hit his'n head because he had an aneurysm. Jesse had to be the one to decide to take his'n pa off of life support, him being the only son and all. The months before that, he drove about 2 hours to the hospital every day to tend to his'n pa. Jesse made his'n peace with his'n pa and then told the doctors to let him go. Jesse and his'n ma knowed he was a-going to a better place because he knowed Jesus. Jesse's pa was a fine man, worked for the gas company, and so did his'n uncles. Uncle Cecil to this day is trifled that Jesse didn't stay with them as a lawyer, but Jesse had his'n own life to live. He lived it well. But as a young'un, one of the boys, life was good. All the boys had many adventures to go on and exploring the world before they started their own families. Those will be stories in theirself. This old Buster saying have a blessed day, and hope y'all enjoy the stories. Talk to you later next week.